Simon, I'm quite relieved that for a change, we're going to talk about something that happened to your body instead of mine.
Yes, I know. Okay. Yeah.
Because the last time we talked about, I think at least on a couple of occasions, we've talked about the violation of my body for medical purposes.
I think we've talked about it a couple times, yeah.
Today you're going to talk about something that happened to you, 2 weeks ago? 3 weeks ago?
2 weeks ago, yep. And it was on a particularly sensitive area of the man. So, yeah, you want me to launch into it?
Yeah, I think, why don't you just go right into it?
So I think I've mentioned this to you a while back, but I've been having some tenderness in the left side of my my boys, and it's come and gone like over the last, I know this is going to sound crazy, but I'm not even kidding you. It's been probably 2 years.
Now, just to clarify for people that may not understand that expression, you're talking about your testicles.
I am talking about my testicles, yes. So the left...
We do have some English as a second language listeners that need to know what my boys means.
All right, so anyway, my left side of my left testicle, let's call it, had some tenderness. And I'm not even kidding, for like the last 2 years. And it's come and gone. There have been days when it's been more and days when it's been less. And certainly there have been some moments where I'm like, I really should get this checked out. And it's been so long. And my wife has been hounding me. She's like, go to the doctor. What's wrong with you? And, there's a combination of being too busy and being a little bit frightened. Like, what if it's something that's an issue? Finally, I get this text from my wife, and she's like, I booked you a doctor's appointment. It's next Saturday. So I go to the doctor, and I hadn't been to the doctor in years because I don't really have anything else wrong with me. Like, I get a cold like everybody else. But that's really it. Like, sometimes every 3, 4, 5 years, whatever, I get like a gastro sickness, right? Where you throw up for a little bit, and, something like a norovirus, and that's it. That's all I ever really get. I've had this ongoing issue, and I go to the doctor. The doctor says, you know what? We should probably send you to get an ultrasound. And I'm thinking, okay, no problem. I can handle an ultrasound. It's not invasive. And it gets booked. I get a call. They say, go to the hospital, show up this day, and you're going to get your ultrasound. So I walk in, I don't have to wait very long. I go in, and just before I went, I said to my wife, I said, this is the first time that, because typically it's not a guy that does ultrasound. It's one of those jobs that for whatever reason is predominantly female, right? And yes. I've had ultrasound.
And we've seen them generally, ultrasounds for when a woman is getting one for when they're pregnant.
Exactly. And I've been to many of those. So, as have you. So, I said to my wife jokingly that morning, I said, this could be, this is predominantly a female profession, ultrasound. I said, another woman may be touching my balls. How do you feel about that? And she laughed like she thought it was funny, and she's like, I'm going to kill her, right? But,
of course, all the ultrasound technicians listening are thinking, oh,
how sexist.
Really?
Yeah.
These are the conversations taking place in bedrooms all across America and the world.
Exactly. So I get to the hospital, I check in, I do my thing, and I sit down in the waiting room, and in my head I'm thinking, oh my gosh, it's probably going to be a woman. It starts to sink in. I'm like, really? Like another woman is going to be touching my balls. And so I hear this voice, Simon, and it is a woman's voice. I look up, and it's a woman. And so I follow her into, and of course you don't know, this could just be somebody walking you in. So she hands me this like robe and says, take everything off, from the waist down, and then just sit here on the bed.
How did you know that was the one who was going to perform the procedure?
I didn't. That's what I'm saying. Like I didn't know. I could have been a woman that just walked me in, right? And then right. That would have been the end of it. But she says, take everything off, put this gown on, and then you sit on the bed. So, I disrobe, and I just before she leaves, I actually said, just for clarity, like, you want me to take, like, my underwear off, right? And because I didn't know, like, maybe she wants you to keep it. I didn't want to be the guy that was like, hey, I'm ready, and my bits are hanging out, right? So, So so she says, yes, absolutely, take the underwear off. So fine, no problem. So I put the robe on. Of course, you put it on backwards, right? But it's got that wraparound thing, and you tie it up, and I'm sitting on the edge of the bed, and then in she comes. Now, it's the same woman, okay? Keep in mind, there's like a bit of a surprise at the end of this. And so I lay down on the bed. She says, lay down. Here, I'm going to put this other robe on you. And she kind of like rests it on my legs. And she says, okay, so I want you to pull up your, the one you're wearing, the robe that you're wearing, not robe, I don't know, whatever it's called, the garment, right? The hospital garment. And
there's a name for it, but I forget what it is. So, isn't it called a Johnny or something like that? Or there's a name.
I don't know. So
I'll look it up.
So you do that. So she pulls it. I pull it up, right? But she's got the other one resting on my legs. And she says, what I want you to do is I want you to pull it up, and then I want you to hold. Okay, so I'm going to use the technical term. So she says, I want you to hold your penis in your hand, right? And just expose your testicles. And then I'm going to pull the other one up, just up, like right up against. So they're really the only thing that they're almost kind of tucked underneath my testicles. So they're kind of popping out. And it's the only two things that are just like visible, right? My whole body's covered in blue.
Which I think is the whole point.
Right. Well, of course, that is the point. So then she kind of takes that tube of like lubricant, right? And just is like, all you hear is like that ketchup sound, like that, right? Like, so that's what you hear. And then I'm like, oh my gosh. And so then it's quiet. Like there's nobody in here, right? It's just me and her, and there's nobody in the rest of this area. Like even next door, there's nobody there. I'm like the only one.
But you're not in a room, like a separate
I'm in a room,
with a
but there's like a curtain. It's not even a room. It's like, it's just curtained off, right? So, and it's kind of like low lights, like it's dim. And I don't know. Mood lighting, right? Yeah. I'm going to caress your balls while you enjoy this mood lighting. So she starts moving the ultrasound equipment around, and she's on my right testicle, which is not the sensitive one. I guess this is like, I don't know if this is like to set a measuring stick or whatever, right? Like, so she's just kind of moving around, and she's not really doing anything. She just seems to be tapping a whole bunch of buttons on this like machine, and then her hand is just resting there for like the longest time, and then so she kind of moves the sheet or the other garment down a little bit on my legs. So now like a little more of my leg is exposed, and I can feel like the warmth of her arm. She has like a t-shirt on, right? Like so I can feel the warmth of her arm resting on like the inner thigh of my leg. And I'm not gonna lie, it felt nice. Like it was a nice feeling, right? Soothing. So she's like caressing my balls with this, whatever it is, this thing, the ultrasound, the instrument. Good word.
I'm on a roll with all the terms.
Yeah,
here.
you are. I can see you reading like a document. Like you're like, oh, I'm going to read all these technical terms. So then she moves to the other side, okay, and it's a little more sensitive, and she's careful and she's kind with my left testicle, and she's moving it around. Of course, she's tapping away on all these buttons and everything like that. And in my hand, I've got my penis. It's being held out of the way, right? But it's covered in this garment that I'm wearing. And I happen to sort of look over at her hand, and I can see that she's married. So in my head, I'm like, okay, now I have a married woman touching my testicles, right? And I can think of I'm thinking of my wife, and I'm thinking, oh, this is going to be a hilarious story tonight. Like I'm going to totally turn this into like a naughty story or something, just turn it, just see what she does. So it was actually pretty funny,
especially with the ketchup. I mean, the whole thing started with the ketchup sounding right. Gel.
Yeah, that gel. So then she's moving things around, and then then she says, okay, well, I'm done now, but I'm going to go up to like your groin area, because I had mentioned that, sometimes I feel some pain up there. Of course, out comes that gel again, like like more ketchup sound. And
was it cold or was it?
It was a bit.
Was it
was
cold?
A bit cool. I wouldn't say it was cold, but it wasn't. It wasn't exactly warm. All right.
Okay.
And she's moving things around. And of course, like my balls aren't covered. Like everything's still exposed, right? While she's up now on, sort of the top part of my groin area. And she's moving things around, tapping away on this machine. Well, I don't know what they do. Like there's a little ball on there that they move around, and then it sounds like they're typing all kinds of stuff. I don't know what it is. And then she's done. Okay. Now, then she says, okay, you can use the sheets to clean up or whatever and all that kind of stuff. And I'm thinking, this is just so weird. Like we had a moment and now I've got to clean up right after it. And, but the crazy part, okay, the crazy part about all of this is that this was a Muslim woman. Okay. And so she had like a hijab on, and, there were all kinds of thoughts through my head. And I mean, why wouldn't a Muslim woman do this? It's a perfectly awesome profession. It's a noble profession. You're helping people discover, maybe problems in their body. You're helping women see like what their baby looks like long before it's born. It's a fantastic profession. It's beautiful, and it's medical, and it's awesome. But this Muslim woman was fondling my testicles in a professional way with an instrument. And I had all kinds of weird thoughts that went through my head. And, I thought to myself, like, are you even allowed to do this? Okay, now I recognize, I just want to put this in here, okay? I'm ignorant when it comes to this kind of thing. So I'm not trying to offend anybody by saying this, but these are my innocent thoughts. Like I'm thinking, like, is this something that you're allowed to do? I mean, probably, right? It's medical. It's not in any way unprofessional. But these are the thoughts that are going on in my head. And then I'm thinking, and you're married. Like, does your husband know that you get to do this? Like, is this okay? I don't know.
This is really interesting. I think this is part of why we do this podcast, because we both think the same way when it comes to these sorts of things. Now, I will say, I think you had a real preoccupation with this before you even left the house, that it would possibly be a woman performing this procedure, which I find a little bit odd. That you actually put thought to that enough that you would have a conversation, and it was all in humor. But when I've had a couple of ultrasounds done, and it didn't even cross my mind whether it would be a male or a female. So I just find it funny that you actually thought about who's going to do this, and it's probably going to be a woman or could be a woman, and you actually had a conversation with your wife about it. That part actually makes me laugh a bit, because it's funny that you put that much thought into it.
Oh yeah, like we talked about it, and I don't know. I will say this. I came home that night and she asked me how everything was, and I turned it into a funnier story, but it would, I turned it into a bit of a naughty story. And of course she was like, oh, get lost. Right. Like, anyway, it was funny.
I think to your other point about the fact that you identified that this was a woman whose religion potentially precludes her from handling the male body or being involved in something like this. And I think that's worth looking into a bit, because I would say I'm as ignorant about it as you are, and people listening to this might be, maybe offended is the wrong word, but might be like, well, what do you mean? You don't understand one thing about.
No, I got to tell you, I know what you're saying, but I mean, why wouldn't? I mean, it's a perfectly honorable profession, and if she had found something that was of concern, I would be the first person to say, oh my gosh, thank you. You just saved my life, or, you've alerted me to this problem that I can now take care of. I will say this. I did hear from the doctor. Sorry, just to go back, just to finish that thought. Why wouldn't God want, her to do that, and potentially save lives? So to me, no matter what God you worship, I would think that God would be quite happy to have you being involved in, saving human lives. So, yeah.
But there are some religions who disagree with certain medical procedures like blood transfusions.
Yeah, and again, I just want to say that I'm coming at this from a completely innocent and non-offensive way. Like I wasn't, I was...
Oh, I get that.
I know you do. I just want to make sure that if anybody hears this and says, wait a minute, this guy's crazy. I'm not. I'm uneducated. So that's the difference.
Well... before we move on, there's two things. I want to ask you one more thing, and I also, of course, want to hear if you have received some results.
Oh,
from
I
this.
did. Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, you mentioned things like the typing sounds and the cold gel or this, just the medicalness of it or the technicalness of it all. My biggest fear when it comes to these types of things is getting aroused and, there being visible evidence of such a thing. That would have been my biggest fear in this. But I've been through these procedures before, and it's anything but arousing. So it's like one of those, you don't have anything to worry about. It's because it's just not going to happen. It's just so not.
I did have that concern.
Like that.
I did have that concern going into it. I thought, what if I, end up getting, an erection? And
sure.
But yeah, you walk in there and you're like, oh, this is not. It's not like you're so compromised, right? Like it's not.
Yeah, they do a very good job of not getting you into that frame of mind or even allowing it. It's just so clinical.
It is very clinical.
It's just you'll just never go there. That's interesting.
Yeah, of course, I did have that thought walking in. I thought, oh my gosh, what if I do get an erection? She's gonna think I'm pervert or I'm turned on or something like that. But of course, that didn't happen. It's weird, and so I did get results. And when I heard back from the doctor, I was very pleased to hear that they found nothing of any kind that was. There wasn't anything that was out of the ordinary. So,
that's good to hear.
So, my next step for that is to get blood tests, and I'll let you know how that goes. I'm supposed to go tomorrow, so.
Well, I'm glad to hear they didn't find anything, and I've also, as we've discussed before, had some of my own medical issues or symptoms similar to what you're describing. Some stomach pains I've had, and cramping and bloating and different things. That was never. One thing I read, if it gives you any comfort, which it probably doesn't now that you've been checked out, was that when it comes to things like testicular cancer, which could have been one of your...
It was definitely one of my concerns.
One thing that I forget whether I read it or whether my doctor told me, and there's a big difference between the two. As we know with Google, you can get down into these rabbit trails of horror when it comes to reading about things like this. But I did read that when it comes to testicular issues like that, there usually is no pain associated with it.
That's what I've heard as well. It's also something that plagues men under the age of 30, typically.
Yeah.
And
those pains, you mean? The pain? Or sensations?
No, testicular cancer. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I just... I don't think I was really super worried about it being testicular cancer. I think something that I did Google was testicular torsion, which is something where, the testicle gets twisted. And I didn't know this until I started doing research on it. But there's sort of a web of veins down there that the testicle kind of sits in, almost like in a... and again, it's like an egg basket, right? And the veins can get twisted.
A nest.
Yeah, almost like a nest. Yeah, and the veins can get twisted and wrapped around the testicle, and if it's very, very bad, it can actually kill the testicle. It's quite painful. It can be quite painful, and a good doctor will be able to go in and sort of untangle it, but sometimes they have to go in and medically do it. I did turn, I did do some research on it, and I thought, oh my gosh, if that's the case, like I'm not looking forward to this. But and I don't know, maybe that is the case. But they didn't seem to find anything in the ultrasound.
So that I assume the ultrasound was looking for abnormal growths, lumps.
That's what I would think.
Things like that.
But I would think
because your tangled web. What did they?
I don't know. I don't know if that covers it.
How do they know about that?
I don't know. If I would think that an ultrasound would see that as well, but if it didn't, then I don't know where to go from here. So we'll take it step by step. Until then, my balls are gonna hurt.
All right, cool kids.
Oh, yeah.
No, it's not cool kids. You wanted to talk about what makes just people cool, right?
Yeah, well, no, you and I, we both take public transit, right? You take the subway in Japan. I take the GO train here in the Toronto region. I also take the subway in Toronto. And, because you're on public transit, you get the opportunity to watch a lot of people. You do a lot of people watching, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Think a lot, and you get to, you lock eyes with people, and sometimes you do that thing where you lock eyes with somebody and you're like, that guy's dangerous looking, and you like quickly look away. Some guys, You're like, I'm going to totally stare this guy down, and then he looks away and you're like, yeah, I win, right? And sometimes you lock eyes with a girl and you're like, oh my gosh, she's really pretty. And then you're like, oh my gosh, I'm married. I can't stare at her because she's going to think I like her. And, sometimes you're, sometimes, yeah. So it's weird, but you get this opportunity to look at people sometimes when they're not looking at you, and you get to stare at them. And you get to analyze who they are, and you make up stories in your head about,
yes.
Where does this guy come from? Where does this girl come from? Where do they work? What kind of profession are they in? Do they have lots of friends? Holy crap, that guy looks cool, right? And I do this all the time, where you see somebody that's, they've got charisma. They've got like an aura about them, and they've got a confidence that you look at them and you think, geez, that guy is cool. I don't even think I could be that guy's friend. He's out of my league in terms of coolness. And
Yet you haven't even had a conversation with them. You're basing this purely on looks.
Completely. And the person's like staring out the window, like they're not even looking at you. Anyway, I had this experience the other day where I saw these guys, and the two of them, they were really cool looking, right? They had cool clothes and bracelets on their arm and tattoos, but not like not a sleeve or anything like that, just like nice one or two on their arms. And they had just this aura about them that you're like, this guy's cool. And I started thinking, like, what makes people cool? What is it? And I don't have an answer other than it might come down to the way they present themselves and the way they feel about themselves. But then when I started dissecting that thought, I was like, okay, but hold on. There are also people that think they're cool and they're not. So what is it? Like you ever seen that guy that's just, or that girl that's like, oh, I'm so cool. But you're like, oh my gosh, you're so not cool, which is it's super critical. And I don't want to be critical. I'm not that kind of.
No, I totally get what you're saying. There is and I think this comes down to, it's how you think of yourself, certainly as part of it. The confidence, positive thinking, positive mindset, that's sort of the inside of what's going on potentially. And I have seen exactly what you've described before. The one that's confident and just looks at and you never have a word at all with them, and you've just gone and made this assumption. And then you'll see another person where you do get to engage. Say it's somebody like at work, like maybe a senior person in your organization, where all you've seen is pictures of them, or heard that maybe even heard just their voices. But generally, a lot of companies, senior management, if they're good, you hear from them a lot, you see them a lot, if it's possible. Obviously, the bigger a company gets, the harder that can be. But generally, your only impression of a senior management type person is a picture. The external aspects, moving into the external side, I think things like how they have their hair, what kind of glasses they wear, what kind of clothes they wear. So I think it's definitely, there's two sides of it. There's how you look and how you think that projects these levels of confidence. And I don't think you're looking for an answer. Well, maybe you are looking for an answer, because I've pondered this very same topic before, and we've all met that person who looks the part, and then as soon as they start speaking, sometimes as soon as they start speaking, you realize, oh, okay, this is just a facade. They're not actually all that there. They're not the person they're projecting themselves to be when you look at them.
Right. Yes.
And then you've got the one who can pull off looking the part and acting the part, and then at some point a shoe ends up dropping, and you realize, oh, now we see who we're dealing with here. This guy looked cool. He sounded cool. Now we've seen his first challenge, and he's completely fallen flat on his
Right.
face. And the whole fakeness has been exposed.
Yeah. I think you and I both try to be the kind of people. I think if you met us on the street, I don't think you'd find that we're much different than the way we're talking now. Like, I think we're pretty much the same people. And some days we have great days and we're totally on and full of life, and other days we're like, today's not the greatest day. But I think we wear our emotions and our hearts on our sleeve, and I don't think we have a facade about us. I think we're pretty much who we are, and I like that aspect of me. I've had colleagues tell me in private in other workplaces where, they might be critical of other people, and but they might say to me, like, "Oh man, like, but the thing about you is that you're real." Like, because I will tell people how I'm feeling. How you doing today, Simon? It's a good day, I guess. Oh, why? Mm-hmm. Well, I saw this happen, or this I got this going on in my life. I mean, I'm not a drip about it. Like, I'm not ruining people's day, but I'm just saying, like, I'm not going to say every day is great. It's not. Every day is not great. How's today? That's good.
Well, that brings up another topic that is related, and that is the guy who you ask, or the girl who you ask, how's it going today? And they always say, fantastic.
Yeah. It's not. I guarantee you it's not. Fantastic? Yeah, okay, sure. Every day is not fantastic.
I wonder sometimes, though, are they of the minority of people out there who, and maybe I'm completely off base by saying the minority of people, but are they among a group who are just always extremely positive about what's happening to them, whether there's bad things happening or not, they're still having a fantastic day? I struggle with that. I struggle with that. I think that you don't use the word fantastic to describe a day where you've just found out somebody's not doing well in your family, or you had a crisis of some sort.
Right. Yeah.
But then,
and let's face it, everybody's got something going on some of the time.
So you have a work persona, which I think is authentic. You personally, I mean, I haven't worked with you in an office in a professional setting, but I know that you, from what I know about you, I'm sure you present yourself in a very authentic way. And I've heard the same thing said about me, that I'm authentic, that I am, but I also have had the same comment that, and then you've made it, that I'm like an onion, where you don't always know what's happening until you start peeling back the layers and learning more about who I am.
Right, yeah.
But I think on the basic premise of just what you do have on the surface, I think both of us are pretty authentic,
right,
and wear our hearts on our sleeve.
So,
and
okay, so then that comes back to are you and I cool? I mean, is that cool,
Mm-hmm.
right? And why do we look at other people and go, oh my gosh, that guy's cool? So the weird thing about this the weird thing about this experience was, I looked at these two guys that were on the subway, and I kind of locked. No, I didn't lock eyes, but you know how you have that awkward exchange where you look at somebody and then you're like, I'm kind of staring at them, so I'm going to look away now. And then you look back and they're looking at you again. and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't want to start something with this individual. So you look away. And then you look back again because now it's become a bit of a train wreck. And every time you look at them, they look at you. And you're like, oh my gosh, now I'm in like this weird look battle, right? And you know, sometimes they'll look away and sometimes you'll look away. And now you're like, oh, this is strange. So I thought to myself, like, if this guy ever came up and was like, you know, hey man, what are you looking at? I would just be like, dude, I was sort of like looking at you saying into my head, you're really cool. I don't understand. I want to be that cool. I don't know how he would have said it. This is awkward the way I'm saying it now, but
no, I know.
Like I would have tried to say something like and diffuse the whole situation because that's really how it started. Like I was just looking at the guy because he was cool, and I thought, you know, this spawned this whole conversation I had in my head by myself. That I had an argument with this guy in my head by myself that didn't even exist. You know, like it was so weird. And that's why I talked to you about this. I said, what is it that makes people cool? Like, why do we stare at people and go, that dude's cool or that girl looks really cool? And I don't know.
There's a lot of topics in here. I mean, number one, you have the cool topic and what makes people cool and what makes us think they're cool and and really are they cool or are they not cool? This is definitely we could unpack this one in a few different ways. I think one observation I will make, maybe it's similar to the observation I made earlier, is that you seem to have a lot of interactions with people that go beyond just a quick glance and then a look back. I mean, you're engaging with a lot of people by the sounds of it. Like, I mean, I've done that too, where I'll look at someone, they look at me, and then I make sure that's the last time I get caught looking. Whereas you sound like you have a little bit of a seesaw going with like people. I mean, does this happen on a regular basis?
I don't know if it happens on a regular basis, but enough to say that, you know, this is, I don't know. I think that I think anybody that would listen to this would say, you know what? I've been in that situation. I know exactly what he's talking about. And I know you know exactly what I'm talking about.
I do. And I think you're right. People would agree and have been in these scenarios before, which is what makes this interesting.
Yeah. So anyway, I don't know what makes people cool. I was hoping you could answer that question, but apparently you can't. So
not really. I mean, I have often pondered what makes kids cool.
Right.
And I think we'll do that on a separate discussion because I do want to unpack that a little bit. Like that cool kid in grade 7 that everybody, you know, there was always the coolest kid in the class.
Right.
And it progresses, right? I don't know when it started, when I first started noticing this, or when people first, like, another thing we could unpack, when do you start presenting as cool? Like at what age does it start?
Yeah.
Could it start at 2, at 5, at 9? Because there are so many things that factor into cool, like we were saying earlier about how you dress. So the cool kid in grade 7 with the leather jacket.
In grade 7?
Yeah, like the kid with the leather jacket.
Yeah, that kid's cool.
You know, that back in our generation, but when we were that age, you know, leather jackets were, you know, something that could be cool.
No, listen, and I don't know if it's happening in Japan, but right now you will see, you know, so like my youngest daughter, who's 9, has a leather jacket. Now it's faux leather. Like, it's not like we paid $400 for like this uber fine leather jacket or anything like that. We you know, I think it was actually given to us as a gift by a grandparent, but which sounds like it, the way I just said that, and out of like I listened to it out of my mouth and I'm like, oh my gosh, it sounds like we're so entitled. But anyway, the point is, she has this jacket, and she's not the only one. She's 9 years old, and she's going to school in this, you know, fancy leather jacket. And
maybe the grandparents wanted to make her more cool.
Yeah, probably. Yeah,
I'm impressed that they gave her something that she actually wants to wear.
Oh, she's a bit of a fashionista. She's got a real eye.
Right, but how often do grandparents give their grandchild something that the kid actually wants to wear? I think that's pretty good.
Nah, I think she picked it. I think she sort of like spotted it at some point and said, "Oh, I want that jacket," and then you know, magically it arrived at, you know,
Big
Christmas
difference.
or a birthday or something like that.
I see. Okay, that's a big
Yeah.
difference, because I was going to say that's pretty cool if grandparents actually. I mean, how often did you get presents from aunts or uncles or grandparents where you were like, "Uh-oh,
My mom,
I don't like this." Yeah, your
like,
parents.
oh, here, have this sweater. No thanks, Mom. I mean, I love my parents, but yeah, you're right. You get gifts all the time, and you're like, oh, this is nice, but I'm never gonna wear this ever.